The AP Computer Science test is coming up for high school students in the US, and instead of studying your notes, you're here on YouTube. Cool. So I've got this secret AP Computer Science A course and exam description that I'm sure no student has ever read before because it's impossible to find on their website, and it's 200 something pages long. So I've read through this already, and I'll point out the highlights of the things you should know. Then we'll go through some practice problems together, and then I want to show you a Java game you can work on to help you reinforce these concepts, because this is Learn Code by Gaming, and some people learn better through a more practical approach. So I did take this test in high school, and I got a 5, but that was 17 years ago, so hopefully I don't embarrass myself too badly answering these questions. So the first thing you should know is what's on the test. 50% of your grade is from 40 multiple choice questions, and the other half of your grade is from 4 free response questions. And here's a breakdown of all the topics covered by the multiple choice questions. And the first thing that should jump out to you is that iteration is going to be 22% of the questions. So we're talking about loops. And the second thing you should notice is array, array list, and 2D array. Those topics are going to be another 30% or so of the questions. So loops and arrays, those kind of go hand in hand, and they really don't want to give you any college credit if you don't understand loops and arrays. And looking down at the free response part of the exam, 2 of those questions are going to be about arrays as well. Alright, here I've organized all of the topics into 3 broad categories. You've got your programming basics, like variables, if statements, and methods, and that'll comprise 22% of the entire test. And then we've got loops and arrays. To stress that one more time, is 55% of the entire exam. And finally, we've got object-oriented programming topics, and that'll cover 23% of the exam. So we're talking about writing classes, creating objects from those classes, inheritance, all that sort of stuff. And as far as what to expect, I'm sure your teacher has gone over this with you, but just in case they haven't, the exam is 3 hours long, so that's 90 minutes for the multiple choice and 90 minutes for the free response. And you'll be given this Java quick reference sheet, which tells you all of the different Java library methods that could possibly be used on the exam. And use this to your advantage throughout the exam. If your brain locks up and you forget something simple, like a certain data type or how to call a method, like this sheet will help you out. Alright, let's get into some sample questions. Question number 1. Consider the following code segment. What is printed out when the code segment is executed? So they're really asking you 2 things here. First, they want to find out if you know how order of operations works in Java. And second, they want to see if you know what happens when you divide 2 integers that don't result in a whole number. So I don't really like this question. First, because this is bad code. In the real world, if you ever have a case where the order of operations is a little ambiguous, you're always going to use parentheses. So like if you were a junior developer working under me, I would tell you to go back and add parentheses here. That'll make your code easier to read, and it'll just be more clear what you mean. And second, when you divide 2 integers, what happens depends on what programming language you're in. And I just feel like the AP Computer Science test should be to test your general programming knowledge, and not so much to test your, understanding of the minutia of Java. So anyway, you divide a by b, that's 5 over 2, and of course that's 2.5, but both of those are integers, so what do you get? You could get a double that's 2.5, you could get it to round up to 3, but what Java does is it just truncates that decimal and it gives you 2. So then 2 times c, which is 3.0, that'll be 6.0. So now that we've got a double involved, it converts everything to a double. And then 6.0 minus 1 will be 5.0, plus 5 will be 10.0. So here the right answer is C. And there is a solution key here, of course, so you can check your answer, and C is indeed correct. And I'll have a link to this document in the description, of course. Alright, question 2. Consider the process words method. Assume that each of its 2 parameters is a string of length 2 or more. Which of the following best describes the value printed when process words is called? Alright, so here they want to see if you can trace through this code. I'd give it one shot to try to do this in your head first, but if you stumble up at all, grab a pencil and some paper and just work through an example. So we'll use cat for word 1 and dog for word 2. Right, because we just need any strings that are of length 2 or more. So then string 1 is going to be the first 2 characters in cat, so just CA. And if you don't know how substring works, remember during the test you have this Java quick reference, and substring's on here so you can just go right to it and figure out exactly how it works. So you don't need to memorize these methods or anything. Hopefully you've used some of these before so you're slightly comfortable with them, But definitely don't waste your time memorizing this sort of stuff. All right, so string 1 is CA, and then string 2. That's going to be the length of word 2, which in this case is dog, and dog has a length of 3. And here it says length minus 1, so 3 minus 1 is 2. And so when we give substring just a single parameter, that's going to use the integer we give it as the from value, and then the to value is just going to be the length of the word, so that'll be the rest of the word. Remember, methods are different when they accept different parameters. All right, so we know that 2 is getting passed in as the from value to substring. And for this, I like to count out the indexes. So this very first position before the letter D in dog, that's your 0 index. And this next one is 1. And then, of course, there's 2. So when you substring from 2, it's going to get everything after that index. So in this case, that's just going to be the letter G. But if our word 2 was a longer word, like doggy, it's going to get everything starting at G onward. So here string 2 would be GGY. So I made a mistake here, and hopefully you caught it. When word 2 is doggy, string 2 should just be Y. String 2 is always going to be just the last letter of word 2. It ended up not affecting our answer, but I definitely wanted to correct that one. Okay, next result is going to be string 2 plus string 1, and this of course is string concatenation. So string 2 comes first, so that'll be GGY, and then string 1 comes next, that's CA. And then here they try to trick you at the very last line. It'd be easy to assume that they're just going to print out the result, but actually they're calling result.index of string 2. So in this case, string 2 is GGY, and the index of GGY in result is of course 0. That's because GGY starts at this position, which is the 0 index in that string. And if we step back a minute and change our second word back to dog, then string 2 is just G, and our result is GCA. And then what is the index of G in our result? It again is going to be 0. So this is a pretty pointless method. It's always going to return 0, which is option A in the multiple choice. And hopefully I got this right, or I'll have to record this again. But yeah, the answer to question 2 is A. So yeah, they'll throw some tricks in there like that. Just remember not to move too fast. I know you want to move kind of quickly so you have enough time for the more difficult questions. You've got 90 minutes for 40 questions, so you have a little over 2 minutes per question. Like any test, you can skip over the hard ones and come back to them later when you have time. But of course, you guys are the experts at taking tests. I haven't taken a test in over a decade. So anyway, question number 3. Which of the following statements assigns a random integer between 25 and 60 inclusive to Rn? So inclusive means that it includes 25 and 60. And all of these options are pretty similar, except for these last two integers. And I don't remember how math.random works in Java, so let's go back to our reference. Okay, so here we are. We're looking at the math class, and we're looking at the random method. And this returns a double greater than or equal to 0 and less than 1. So notice it's inclusive on 0, but it's not inclusive on 1. So my strategy here is I'm just going to check what happens at the extremes. You know, what happens when math.random returns 0.0, and what happens when it returns 0.999. We know that math.random is never going to return 1.0 because of what we just read down below. So for option A, if we put in 0 times 25 plus 36, that's going to be 36. We know that one's wrong. For option B, 0 times 25 is going to be 0 plus 60. We know that one's wrong. For option C, 0 times 26 plus 60 is 60 again, so that's got to be wrong. 36 times 0 is 0 plus 25. It's going to be 25. So that's potentially correct at the lower bound. And then same for option E. 60 times 0 is 0 plus 25 will be 25. So we know it's got to be either D or E. So now I'll just check D and E for the second extreme. So 0.999 times 36 is going to be something like 35.999 plus 25. That's going to be like 60.999. And then this parentheses int is casting this double value to an int. So it's just going to, remember, chop off that 0.999 and leave us with 60. So it's looking like D is our answer, but just to be safe, let's see what happens with E. So 0.999 times 60 is going to be something like 59.999. And then we're going to add 25 to that. And we get 84.999, which is nowhere close to what we want our maximum bound to be. So we know it's not E either. So the answer is D. Once we do that casting, like I mentioned, it will end up with 60. And we already knew that D worked well for the lower bound. All right, let's do one more of these multiple choice, and I'll leave the rest of them for you to do. They've got 15 sample questions here for you to work on. All right, question 4. Vehicles are classified based on their total interior volume. The classify method is intended to return a vehicle classification string value based on the total interior volume in cubic feet as shown in the table below. So they've got mini compact, subcompact, compact, midsize, and large. The classify method, which does not work as intended, is shown below. So the name of this method is classify. It returns a string, and it takes one parameter, a volume int. The classify method works as intended for some, but not all values of the parameter volume. For which of the following values of volume would the correct value be returned when the classify method is executed? All right, so it's asking us which input does return the correct value. So again, I'll just trace through this code. I'll start with A, 80. If volume is 80, is volume greater than or equal to 120? No. Is it less than 120? Yes. So it'll go here, car class equals midsize. And then it won't hit any of these other else ifs. So it'll return midsize. And is midsize correct for 80 according to this table? It is not. So we can already see that, this if statement right here is problematic. I mean, you could go through the rest of the multiple choice options one by one and see which one works. But if I already know this is a problem, I'm going to look at the one above it. If volume is greater than or equal to 120, then it's a large. And according to this table up here, that checks out. Anything that's 120 cubic feet or more should be a vehicle class size large. So are there any options that have a value above 120? There aren't. So I'll just go through the next one. B is 90. So volume's 90. It's going to get caught in this same one again. Call it midsize. And according to this chart, that's incorrect. And then finally, E, 115. Is 115 greater than or equal to 120? It's not. Is 115 less than 120? It is. So we'll get midsize. And 115 does fall in the range for a midsize vehicle. So the correct answer here is E. All right, I just peeked at this question number 5, and this looks interesting, so let's give this one a shot too. Which of the following best describes the value of the Boolean expression shown below? A, and, not, B, or A. So here there's only 2 variables, and each of them can only be either true or false. So that means there's only 4 total possible combinations here, so it'd be pretty easy to just test all those out. So these are all your possible combinations. A and B are both true, A and B are both false, A is true and B is false, or A is false and B is true. So in the first case, let's look at the OR statement first. We have true or true, that's going to be true. The not is going to flip that over to false. So then we have A is true and false, and that's going to be false. Next we have B is false or A is true, so that'll be true. The not turns it to a false. A is true and false, that's also going to be false. All right, here A is false, so the first half of this AND statement is always going to be false, which means the whole thing is going to always evaluate to false. And then again with the last one, A is false, which means this whole statement is always going to evaluate to false. So it looks like the correct answer is B, the value is always false. And the answer to 5 is indeed B. And you could just stare at this expression and try to logic your way through it. But during tests like this, it's good to conserve your mental energy whenever you can. And so if you find a simple way to figure it out like this, where you just need to test 4 different possibilities, and just do it that way. All right, let's go see what these free response questions are about. And I'm going to look for ones with loops and arrays, because we talked about how important those are for this test. All right, so we've got 2 example questions here for free response, and one of them is about arrays. So the gizmo class represents gadgets that people purchase. Some gizmo objects are electronic and others are not. A partial definition of the gizmo class is shown below. All right, so they give us this gizmo class and there's some methods in here. The implementations aren't shown, but the comments above them explain what the methods are intended to do. The online purchase manager class, gotta love Java class names, manages a sequence of gizmo objects that an individual has purchased from an online vendor. You will write 2 of the methods of the online purchase manager class. A partial definition of the online purchase manager class is shown below. So we've got this property here, purchases, which is an array list of gizmos. And then we've got the two methods that we are supposed to implement. And of course, these comments above the methods describe what the method's supposed to do. And we've already been given the parameters for these methods. The second one doesn't take any. And we've also been given the return type for each one of these methods. So part A is writing the count electronics by maker method. And we're supposed to assume that an online purchaser object called OPM has already been declared somewhere, and it's been initialized so that the array list of purchases already contains some gizmo objects. And specifically, it has 6 objects, and it has these values for isElectronic and getMaker. And then here's some examples it's showing you. So we're going to be writing this count electronics by maker method, and given these call values, this is the return value that they want you to have. So if they pass in ABC, we're supposed to look at this table. So this will be our array list of purchases. And we see that ABC appears in this list 4 times, but only 2 of those times, index 4 and index 0, do they have electronics. And so on for these other examples. All right, so we start with this method, and we've got this purchases variable to work with on the class. And they've told us that this method needs to return a count for the given maker string. So we're going to be looping through this array list, and basically what we need to do is every time we see the given maker in the list, if isElectronic is also true, we're going to add 1 to the total that we're returning. So we've got a variable here to keep track of how many we find. And then the easiest way to loop over an array list is with a for each loop. So for each purchase inside of the purchases list. Now we only want to increase the number returned if the gizmo purchase maker is the same as the maker that was passed in through the parameter. And we can use this getMaker method for that. And then you might use a double equal sign to compare that purchase maker to the maker string. But in Java, they prefer that on strings you use this equals method instead. And also we need to make sure that this purchase is electronic. Let me change my variable name here just to shorten things up a little bit. So this will just be P for purchase. So now we can use this isElectronic method on the P object. And when both those things are true, we can then increment num by 1. So you can do that like this, where you just take num equals num plus 1, or you can do it the fancy way with num plus plus. And now let's test this method out. So let's say that maker is this XYZ. So going off this given array list in this table here, maker is XYZ, num starts at 0, and then for each one of the purchases inside this purchases array list, for the first one, p.getMaker is going to return ABC. Does that equal maker? No. So it'll go down to the end of this if statement and then loop back around to the beginning of the for loop. For the second one, at index 1, again, getMaker is ABC, so it won't increment num. The next one, getMaker is XYZ, so this equals part of the statement is true. And then P is electronic. Well, according to this table, that will also be true. And so num will be incremented by 1, so now num is 1. For the next one, elementOP, it's going to fail this getMaker part because elementOP is not equal to that XYZ that we're testing with, and then so on for the final 2 items. So in the end, we'll return 1 when we pass in the parameter XYZ. And that lines up with this table here. When you make this call, we expect a value of 1 to be returned. And in comparing this to the official solution, you can see that we got pretty close. Really just our variable names are different. They called it result instead of num, and they used G instead of P. So it looks to me like we would get all 4 points for this solution. All right, so that's all the sample problems I'm going to go through today. My voice is starting to get raspy again, like it usually does when I make YouTube videos. But I promised you guys that I'd have a game you could work on to practice your programming. So check out my last video, How to Make a Video Game in Java, 2D Basics. And when you download that project, what I'd have you do is create a new class based off of this coin class. We'll just be creating a new object type that appears on this game board. So make your new class, find an image that's 50 pixels by 50 pixels, update to that image path and load image. And then over in the board class, create a new method to populate that new object type. So maybe you end up with something like this, where you've got an injured cat running around for health packs, and you're trying to avoid these cages. So to do that, I just created this new cage class. I literally just copied it from this coin class, updated the class name, updated the image path to use this cage image. And then the rest of the work is all in the board class. I created a new property on the board class to hold our list of cages. I'm using an array list to do that. In the constructor for the board class, I'm populating that cages list just by calling this new method called populate cages. In this populate cages method, it's going to return an array list of cages. And here I'm just creating a new array list. I'm adding 2 new cage objects to it, and then I'm returning that array list. And finally, in the paint component method, I loop over all of those cages in the cage list and I draw them. And this will all make more sense if you go through that other video. But right here, writing this populate cages method, you can do all kinds of different things in here using random and looping over different lists. It's just a good spot to get used to working with arrays. And of course, you can look at this populate coins method down here to get some inspiration. So if you're looking for a more practical, hands-on approach to studying, go ahead and check out that video and try making your own game. So good luck on your test, and one more thing. If you've taken the AP Computer Science class, then definitely, please actually take the test. Even if you do just decent, you can save yourself a ton of money on tuition by getting these college credits. And I know right now that might seem kind of like whatever, but in a few years, it'll be a big freaking deal. And if you don't have the money to pay for the test, just please tell someone at school. We might even need to reach out to multiple different adults you know. But there could be a scholarship or a fund you don't know about, and people are generous. So I hope something as silly as the exam fee doesn't stop you. And even if you know 100% for sure that you're going to bomb this test, just take it anyway. You'll learn a lot from the experience, even if you don't walk away with college credit. All right, that's all I got. Peace.